One of the steps that you had on your outreach was listen to community values. How did you go about identifying the community values?
So what I was describing very briefly was a series of community values meetings that was set up specifically to elicit that from participants. So we had 2 meetings, and then our PA worked really hard to get people out to them. And then we set up a process to have conversations. We trained some facilitators and note takers in advance so that they could work with small groups to help them talk about what they cared about and draw on the map.
Right, and it was involving a map, if that wasn't clear. So the community values were actually being mapped and drawn on a map. And I can share, as one of the facilitators, a story that makes me get a little verklempt every time I mention it, is that there was a gentleman in my group who told me at the end, and I'm not making this up, he said, I came here tonight probably to oppose this project, but I realize we have shared values. I mean, because, somebody was pointing out that he liked night sky viewing. That was what he liked on the plateau. Somebody else liked snowmobiling. Like, they had very different ideas about what they did on the plateau, but they also cared that the plateau was there, and it was really moving.
And we did a few other workshops that weren't as map specific. They were getting responses, verbal responses from people, and we wrote them down verbatim. And you can still go to our website and see some of them. And some of the values that people stated were property rights. Don't mess with my land, things like that. And we made sure that that was included in what we presented. It was not only we want to conserve the habitat, but also everything that everybody said.
Questions? I'm interested in these meetings you had with the municipal officials. And I know you fed them dinner, but assuming there was maybe something else that helped them to change their mind, and sort of what went into that, how did you sell it to them, I guess?
Yeah, so I think the layout of those meetings was dinner, which had a lot of informal discussion. There was an update of what we were doing, and we kept that short. It was like 10 minutes, and that was it. And then it was really an open agenda for them. One of the things that came out of it early on was they really enjoyed talking to one another. So they actually got the supervisors from the whole county together and started meeting. And that didn't continue. It lasted for a little while, but our meetings still do continue. So it really was being honest. They were in the room, they'd ask questions, and we would give them honest answers, and we would have these open discussions. And it was, this was years in the making. It was, we've been at this for 6 years now with them. So it was that building trust part, which is part of the title of this. It's just being in the room together, having these conversations, being honest, and sharing. And over time, they got, we were walking the talk, and they were seeing that and partnering with us.
I remember that they met one-on-one first, right?
Right.
So that probably helped a little bit. And then how many supervisors participated over time? Was that constant, or did that change?
Yeah, so there were some of the same supervisors that were there in the beginning are still participating. Others have cycled through. One town went from supportive to totally unsupportive. Like, we set up a meeting with them in person, and we got there, and they said, the supervisor turned to the highway superintendent that was there and said, oh, didn't we vote against the rest of the plateau? And he said, yeah. And he said, well, we're not going to talk to you. So went all the way there to have the meeting, and he said no. And what he didn't realize was that the town didn't pass a resolution in support of us, the last administration. But Grafton's, there are 7 towns that are coming to these meetings now that are all really just bubbly in their support. Just the things they're saying about us and the support that they're giving.
And that's an example of keeping at it, you know, they're not gonna be your best friend, you know, right out of the gate. They're probably gonna say some things that you're really uncomfortable with. Oh, I'm sorry. It's another example of keeping at it and how that's important and kind of rolling with the punches and knowing that they're gonna be resistant at first, especially if they're in a public or other people are present. But know that if you keep at it and build trust and listen, that you have a lot of potential to change their minds and bring them in.
So what was the initial message, if you sort of scrapped, you know, where you want to do an open space plan, you went back to them and said, well, this is what we want to do, we want to talk to you about it. What was the initial message that got them engaged?
Yeah. So we wanted to invite them to participate in the development of the regional conservation plan. So that it was, you know, conversations about, you know, there is this area that we feel is important, and we want to hear what you have to say about it and what you would like to see in the conservation plan, and we'd like you to participate. So that they were invited to all public meetings, and then there were a stakeholder meeting that was specific to the municipal officials.
Time for one more question. There's a couple of hands. Judith, let's go ahead and do.
I guess I would still like to hear at least one example of a more specific conversation. You said earlier they saw that we walk the talk. And so what kinds of things, because there's a fear that I've run into on the part of officials and citizens groups of being manipulated. Well, you're just here to listen, and then you're going to take what we tell you and turn your message around to fit it. How did you, I mean, what were your selling points? Did you say, if we conserve this, we'll bring tourism in? What got them on board? And what did you promise that they saw that you followed through on?
Well, I'll try to remember specifics. How did you start your question? Because I had a thought when you first. What did we say?
Sell it to the officials. What were the real talking points?
And what was it that convinced them that you were sincere? When you said walk the talk.
Well, one of the things we said early on is that we don't oppose projects. We do not oppose development. We don't oppose anything. We just don't oppose things. We want to outpace development with conservation. And we want to promote conservation. We want to promote positive things. And the town of Nassau, they actually had a situation where there was a proposed mine in the town, and it was in a spot where they didn't want it. So the town was fighting against it. And they came to us and they asked us to please help them fight against the mine. And we told them, we're sorry, but we really don't do that. We don't oppose projects. And we got a letter of support for our next grant from them that said, it was unanimous support from that town. And they said that the RPA has I forget how he put it, but just a commitment to their principles that is unwavering, you know, and we support them 100%. So, and that's not the only thing. There were a series of those things, and it's hard to remember all of them, but it was that kind of thing where, you know, and if they had a concern, then we didn't just try to explain the concern away. We tried to work within that concern and address it.
Well, and I think that you said, when you said you were going to do something, you did it. I mean, so that's where you build that trust and integrity. If you said you're going to have a conservation plan process where we listen to you, and you did it, and then you include those concerns in the plan, when those things happen over and over again, then people start to see, okay, they mean what they say. So again, this is many actions over many years that built it. It wasn't overnight, and it wasn't a magic word. It was really many actions over many years.
And like you said, one conversation at a time. I mean, that's something I think a lot of people jump over that step of having those really personal conversations, and instead they jump right to the public meeting or they jump right to the big project. So I'm sure that made a difference as well, building trust. Thank you both so very much for your presentations.